Search and rescue efforts are still happening over deadly floods in Texas. And we want to start by thanking all of the first responders who have been putting their lives on the line to find and help survivors. And there are volunteers out there who are doing the same thing. Americans are stepping up for Americans. Because, you know, the flood doesn't care who you voted for. Floods don't care. They come take your house, they take your family. This is what we've seen. And questions are growing about what we could have done to prevent this tragedy. And here's what Senator Ted Cruz had to say about it.
I think there have been some eager to point at the National Weather Service and say cuts there led to a lack of warning. I think that's contradicted by the facts. For either side to attack their political opponents, I think that's cynical and not the right approach, particularly at a time when we're dealing with a crisis and we're dealing with grief.
This is true, but these safety concerns came up before this tragedy happened and have been coming up for years.
Yeah.
People in power have had the opportunity to make changes to the grid, to all of these things that we are seeing. And I'm just wondering, when is the right time to ask this question then?
I think now is the right time to ask the question. And I understand that people are grieving. I myself sent my children away to sleepaway camp in Maine and in New Hampshire. And the thought that my kids would not be coming back is something that is, for me, unfathomable. And I feel such empathy for these families. But this could have been either mitigated or avoided altogether. In 2017, my understanding is that Carroll County, where this happened, contemplated installing a flood warning system. That would have been sirens, not emails that the kids wouldn't get, because kids in camp, they don't have their phones with them. They take them away. So these sirens could have saved lives. It was rejected as too expensive, and money instead was funneled to border security. Border security. And I want to also say this. You said Americans are stepping up. Well, the president of Mexico sent Mexican firefighters and people to go and help these Americans, people that they wanted to keep out. And I'll also say this last thing. A single siren can cost as high as $50,000, but the small, unincorporated town of Comfort had something that Carroll County didn't have. They put the money into the sirens, and not one person died. Not one person died.
One second. So I agree with all your assessment and your facts, but I respectfully disagree that this is the time right now. And I say that mainly because if my child had left for camp and didn't come home, to know what happened to them this raw and recent, I don't think I'd want to know it could have been avoided yet. What I need to do is have the bodies found. There are at least 105 people still missing, maybe more that we don't know about. While they're still retrieving them, I think everyone needs to stay on the mentality of everyone's getting in there and learning, because I do think there's a time for that conversation, and the sirens are probably the answer, because I grew up in the Midwest where we had tornado sirens our whole lives. So I know that that is going to be coming up, but right now I can't help but imagine that if my child was gone right now and I heard someone say that it could have been avoided, I don't know how I'd take my next step, really.
And I've got to say, I think that first and foremost, the focus right now should be on first responders and victims and ways we can help them. I'm sure we have stuff on our website that tells you how you can. But there's also a distinction between politicizing a tragedy and pointing fingers and saying, here are the lessons learned. Now, first is the first response. There are still bodies being pulled from the water. There's still people looking for their family. The next is, what could we learn from this? I agree with your assessment, but respectfully disagree. This could have avoided a loss of life altogether.
It avoided a loss of life in that one county that was upriver.
Yes, because this specifically was a once-in-a-100-year storm. They'd had something close in 1987, but not to this degree. And the sirens could have gone a long way. But I want to highlight this. I think in the worst moments of tragedy, because hurricanes don't choose if you're a blue or red state, who you voted for, the best in humanity steps up. And this Coast Guard rescue swimmer, Petty Officer Scott Ruskin, helped pull 165 people from it. It was his first ever mission. And I think of that, and I know people who attended this camp. It's so heartbreaking. I think after action reports are really important, but politicizing and pointing fingers is not the answer.
Yeah, but Trump does it all the time. he immediately starts the blame game.
Yeah.
But don't
so maybe
cater to
Ms.
the
Levitt
lowest
should take
common
the
denominator.
But it's
talk
not-
to her boss.
I don't think
Well,
it's about. I don't think it's about pointing fingers. I think it's about assessing how this could have been avoided, why it happened. When we have the school shootings, everyone sends thoughts and prayers, but they never want to talk about it.
But there is a
and
difference.
Then we forget about it because another school shooting.
But there is a
happened, and
difference
another one
with a
happened.
school shooting. It's fair to say this could be avoided because there is an X factor of a person and a gun with a will to do it. With a natural disaster, I disagree that it's like this could have been
Yes.
avoided.
Well,
Nature
here's-
does not
here's-
discriminate.
Well, she's talking about
here's
the
how-
sirens. The sirens.
I know, but to say that would have resulted in no loss of life, I don't think there's any
they would have
data
at
to
least
suggest
known that was
Well,
coming.
here's
that.
where I'm going to end this. What I'm going to say is the conversation is really about, we know that you've been aware because we've had loss of life
Yeah.
there.
In this particular
In this
area. That's
particular area. We have talked about the fact that you need to improve your grid. We have talked about all of this. So it's important, I think, for everyone to understand that, and I'm shocked that this is coming out of my mouth. I'm not pointing a finger at the man in the White House. I'm saying there's a state that is in trouble and has been, and it doesn't seem like anything is changing. And maybe we need to get on top of that. That's my point.
Yeah.